Findings across the world are...
Jane Monkton-Smith is a criminologist at the University of Gloucestershire. She's currently leading one of the biggest studies of domestic homicide in the UK.
Over 95% of cases it will be a man, and it will usually be the head of the household. One of the shocking things about this is that they are nearly always, if not always, planned. And there can be quite a lot of rage and fury involved, and they are usually incredibly violent.
Well, hello, welcome back. In this video, we will be taking a close look at feminist criminology. Now, as some of you will be aware, I have several videos that relate to the general topic of feminist science. But this video is slightly different in that we will consider a real-world example and examine the application and consequences of feminist science in the real world. And as we will discover, there are some very serious and far-ranging consequences. We will be taking a look at a feminist criminologist, Dr. Jane Monckton-Smith, who first came to my attention because of an interview that was featured in the BBC News programme, Victoria, Derbyshire. The introduction to the interview was as follows. A criminologist currently leading one of the biggest studies of domestic homicide in the UK believes that family killings are on the increase. Dr. Jane Monkton-Smith says that in 95% of the cases, the killer will be a man, and usually head of household. Well, this certainly got my antenna quivering. 95% seems a remarkably high percentage. Indeed, it seems suspiciously high. So I thought it worth checking the numbers. And what I found is somewhat concerning for many reasons. These reasons, I hope, will become obvious as we adventure into the strange and somewhat surreal world of feminist criminology and forensics. Dr. Jane Monkton-Smith is an expert in the area of homicide, stalking and coercive control. She is a senior lecturer in criminology and director of the Centre of Learning and Innovation in Public Protection at the University of Gloucestershire. She has been advising police at local and national level, working with national stalking and homicide charities, and working with organisations in the areas of domestic violence, coercive control, homicide and stalking. Her latest research has been developed into a reference tool which forms a response model and helps professionals respond to coercive control, domestic abuse and stalking. This has become known as the DART response model. This has been published as an app and is being used by police and other professionals. So this DART response model has its very own professional-looking website, which will be linked below. The first thing you might notice is the header to the introductory text, which states, "By this time next week, around 10 people in the UK will be dead because of domestic abuse and stalking." That brief header contains 10 words, but raises some questions. The first question one might ask relates to the use of the term people. People, after all, can be male or female. But Monkton-Smith's primary focus appears to be women. So the use of people might suggest a tendency towards obfuscation. Another thing that might be of concern relates to simple statistics. The number of people killed by their spouse in the UK varies by year. But to arrive at the magical figure of 10 per week, you would have to include both male and female victims of domestic homicide. According to the Office of National Statistics for 2015, that would give us 10.7 per week. So there is a tendency towards using two particular terms, women and people. People will be used when statistics include both male and female victims, but women will be used when statistics become favourable to a particular narrative. Interesting, isn't it, what can be inferred from a single paragraph? Before we go any further, I think we need to take a good look at the company that promotes the DART model. The company is Public Protection Support Services, or PPSS, and claims to be a social enterprise. But Public Protection Support Services is a registered, limited company, and it is limited by shares. Now, for the sake of clarity, it has to be said that limited companies may or may not be run as social enterprises. but it is not a community interest company, or CIC. Therefore, directors' remunerations need not be capped, nor is there an asset lock in place. So, could you hazard a guess as to who the CEO of Public Protection Support Services might be? Let's look at the team. Did you guess right? So the CEO is Monkton-Smith, but we do have a few more directors, so let's add them in so that we've got a good overview of who was an interest in this company. Rod Horrocks, Operations Director, Business Startup Guru, and also a director of the company appointed the 1st of March 2016. Sue Haley, Operations Manager and Women's Study Graduate, appointed Director 15th of March 2016, which leaves us with Craig Mitchell, the social media wizard. So it's interesting, isn't it? There is quite a unique business model being employed here. Let's draw a diagram to clarify. First, advocate for the introduction of a new offence, such as coercive control. Next, present yourself as the expert. After all, no one else has the faintest idea of what it might be. Third, position yourself as the primary training organisation. Of course, being a social enterprise, a large percentage of the profits will be dedicated to research. Can anyone guess which researcher is ideally placed to receive that money? It really is a perfect model. It's an almost entirely closed loop. The only thing that it needs is public monies to prime the system, and it becomes a self-perpetuating money engine. It's quite impressive. The company presents as a public service, profits from the sale of training and supporting materials. The CEO receives remuneration, and what profits remain go to supporting her own research. It's quite impressive. What is not so impressive, though, is that legislation has been introduced and police investigative procedures are being influenced by the unsubstantiated fancies of a few feminist scholars. So, we can buy the app on the App Store, we can buy the book on Amazon, we can purchase our masterclasses and extremely reasonably priced training materials from the Public Protection Support Services. We can even hire our guest or keynote speakers all at incredibly reasonable cost. But what the hell are we buying into? I think we should take a close look at Dr. Jane Monckton-Smith. No, better yet, let's examine the good doctor forensically. The first thing I found interesting is that I could find no peer-reviewed papers by Monkton-Smith. She has written several books, mainly relating to gendered issues, and some on criminology. On the PPSS website, these apparently constitute research, but original research or peer-reviewed papers I failed to find. Perhaps someone out there might be able to point me to such, but my searches thus far found nothing other than her doctoral thesis, which I will cover next, because it gives us an insight into how Monkton-Smith approaches her work. Chapter 1 of her doctoral thesis contains the following. A second and equally difficult aspect of this project is to effectively resist knowledge and truths produced in dominant discourses, a position which can appear anti-intuitive or unsophisticated, and this too requires explanation at points in the thesis. Well, having read the thesis, I can assure the viewer that she was successful in both ambitions. She consistently resisted both knowledge and truth throughout the entire exercise. Counterintuitive and unsophisticated would be one way of expressing it. But if you think back to my video relating to feminist science, such attitudes, even when expressed within a doctoral thesis, should come as no surprise. Monkton-Smith is described as an award-winning researcher on the PPSS website, but perhaps that is not an entirely accurate description. She has certainly won the FWSA Annual Book Prize in 2013 for her book Murder, Gender and the Media, Narratives of Dangerous Love. But who are the FWSA? Well, unsurprisingly, it's the Feminist and Women's Study Association. No surprises there then. But the interesting thing is how this work was described by the feminist organisation itself, which includes a description of the work by one of the judges on their website. The judge had this to say about the book. This book demonstrates excellent scholarship grounded in feminist theory, directly contributing to numerous areas of feminist research. Now this is important because the work of Monkton-Smith has been recognised by feminists as being grounded in feminist theory, so her worldview can hardly be described as unbiased. Quite the contrary, feminism is a political ideology, making the work of Monkton-Smith Lysenkoist. This is also an almost textbook example of self-referencing within the feminist community. Feminist scholars are inclined to write glowing praise for each other's efforts, and thus become award-winning authors within the community, which in this instant morphs almost magically to award-winning researcher. Another book written by Monkton-Smith, Domestic Abuse, Homicide and Gender, Strategies for Policy and Practice, is used to support training in the DART methodology. It is also cited as an example of research on which the methodology rests. But if you read this masterpiece, you will find some rather surprising assertions, like the following, contained in the section titled Abusers in the System, where the author states, "Another problem which ought to be considered is the number of police officers and professionals which are abusers themselves." She goes on to cite the percentage of abusers within the ranks of the police as 40%. This conclusion should be extremely concerning, not least to police officers themselves. But where did this particular percentage come from? It seems incredibly high. Well, the citation merely refers to Lonsway 2006, and on investigation this appears to refer to research by Dr. Kimberly Lonsway, who is the Director of Research with the organisation End Violence Against Women International, another feminist scholar. The accuracy of such statistics is obviously beyond the scope of this video, and I include them only as a typical example of what is contained within the book. I have only been able to find a single review of the book itself, and it was not entirely flattering. The reviewer had this to say, and I quote, "It seems the authors were unable to conceive that men are abused by their female partners as well. It is always the female that is the victim, and the abuser is male." The reviewer went on to describe the book as a book that screams with PC terminology. Intimate terrorism, anyone? Such is a product of feminist research, but statistics and scholarship are the least of our concerns. We now turn to some public statements made by the good doctor, in particular her pronouncement in relation to the frequency of false rape allegations. Apparently she holds the view that such false allegations are not just rare, but very, very rare, and she is not shy in presenting this view in the media. In fact, she expressed this view in 2013, when there was a particularly well publicised miscarriage of justice, and again in 2015 in the light of another particularly serious example that resulted in imprisonment and later release on appeal. In fact, in that interview, she was sat next to a man who had just been released from prison after serving 6 months for a crime he had not committed. But still, with full knowledge of the events of 2013 and 2015, and all the numerous cases between these dates, which she must have been aware of, she still maintained that such allegations are very, very rare. What are we to make of this? Well, that might be the position of Monkton-Smith, but what do the legal practitioners who were involved in such cases believe? After another particularly serious and well publicised case, Louis Richardson case, where the defence team was able to rip the case against him to shreds, his defence lawyer, Philippa McAtasney, made the following public statement, and I quote, "The accuser was dangerous and dishonest." She went on to say that none of us wants to believe anyone tells lies or makes false allegations, but experience in the courts shows it does happen. End of quote. And its frequency cannot be described as very, very rare. We are all aware of the well-publicised cases, but I would expect a criminologist to be cognizant of the less publicised cases as well. And if we refer to Home Office statistics, we find the following situation prevails. In a detailed Home Office research study from Feist et al., 676 complaints of rape were analysed. 100 of these were ultimately recorded as no crimes by the police. In other words, the police found evidence that no crime had occurred. In 42 of these, the victim admitted that no crime had taken place. In another 8, the police found evidence or information that no offence took place. This is 50 out of 676, or 7.7%. Apply the 7.7% figure to the 18,800 rape allegations made to police in 2011-2012 in England and Wales. That translates to about 1,450 false allegations per year. This figure is directly taken from Home Office figures, which you can verify by following the link in the description box below. 7% I would consider significant rather than very, very rare. But obviously, I'm not a feminist criminologist. In the next video, we will consider the DART methodology itself, which it seems to me is a nightmare amalgamation of the politically inspired Duluth model and the concept of pre-crime. In other words, it could be accurately described as the implementation of a Minority Report style methodology. Thank you for listening. I hope you found something of value in this video. If you'd like to support my channel, I now have a Patreon page. If you can't contribute via Patreon, then subscribe, comment or rate. It's all good. Hope to see you next time.